So as Clement said, my name is Ifel Gunlay. I'm with the FAA. I'm currently the acting manager of the Regulations and Policy Group in the Rotorcraft Standard Branch with the FAA. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. I first want to take the time to thank Clement and David for giving me the opportunity to present and just share with you some of the activities that we have going on in our office. I believe that this year has been marked with continued collaboration with EASA, and I hope to see that even more so going forward. So the three topics I would like to discuss today are where I think most of us has probably heard or somewhat familiar with the air transformation and reorganization that we're doing. And so I'm not going to go into detail, but I would like to touch on how some of those efforts affect how we do business in the Rotorcraft Standard Branch. And then also I'll be discussing some rulemaking and policy that we have going on in our office. So what is air transformation? Air transformation is a comprehensive, multi-layered, long-term endeavor. It starts off with the blueprint that contains 8 vision elements that will inform the lower-level plans. Next is a strategic comprehensive plan, the CSP, and this will outline more detailed requirements for the internal and external stakeholders. It is a what we tend to achieve, and will provide the tactical framework on how to achieve the requirements in the blueprint. And finally, the last one is an integrated implementation plan. Will provide details on how to achieve the specific requirements in the CSP. This must be a level D software running this. That's good. So the Air Transformation Blueprint identifies 8 vision elements that are considered essential to realizing the vision for air transformation. So I'm just going to quickly step through some of these. Accountability framework helps clarify the FAA and industry's role during certification. Risk-based decision-making will allow air to scale the level of rigor used during approvals and oversight and leverage resources more effectively throughout the organization. Promote international partnerships will employ a methodical process to establish, build, and maintain confidence in foreign aviation authorities, or just send me to Cologne about every 3 months. Foster innovation will minimize barriers between safe and timely adoption of innovative products, technologies, and practices. Strengthening air industry relationships. This will promote a collaborative relationship between air and industry, and the basis of this relationship would be a shared The basis of this relationship will be accountability and mutual respect for each other's values and a shared commitment to safety. And finally, the last 3, collaborative work environment, learning organization, and information management strategy are vision elements geared towards the internal workings of aircraft certification to help us be a more agile organization. So as I mentioned earlier, the CSP takes those 8 vision elements and further breaks them down into 10 initiatives and 4 outcomes. So what does this all mean? What does this mean for how we're going to relate to one another? The CSP now enables us in aircraft certification to better align our resources and efforts to the transformation outcomes and the initiatives. So when we stop and look at our activities that we do in our office, in the Rotorcraft Standard Branch, and we ask ourselves, what are we doing or not doing that supports these outcomes? It has encouraged and shaped how we perform and execute the functions that we do. So for example, the 4th initiative identified in the CSP is early engagement. So we've been more deliberate to have early conversations with applicants and potential applicants regarding their innovative and new technology products. So we understand that the typical 3 to 5 year timeline required for a TC project does not always support the development of new technologies and the associated policies and regulations. So early engagement will reduce the delays caused from policy development occurring in the critical path of a TC application. So under the 5th initiative, performance-based regulations, we're taking a fresh look at our regulations to identify areas where we can be more performance-based and be less prescriptive. So hopefully you can see some of this in our recent rulemaking that we've put out in our office. So these are just 2 quick examples of how we're using the CSP to change what we do and inform how we do it. So as we continue to integrate aspects of the CSP into what we do, the hope is and the expectations that we'll be able to keep pace with the globalization and the trend of aviation, while also maintaining and meeting the expectations of the flying public, government entities, and also industry. Let's see here. So next I'm going to talk about some of the rulemaking activities that we have ongoing in our office. So the first rulemaking activity that I'm presenting here is the miscellaneous Part 27, Part 29. So we're actually on the tail end of this rulemaking effort. First, I want to give a little background on this rule. So back in 2011, there was a presidential executive order that ordered all U.S. agencies, U.S. government agencies, to review their regulations for those that may be outdated, ineffective, insufficient, or excessively burdensome to the public. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, that's pretty much all the regulations that you have. But one of the ways we took advantage of this was to review the special conditions, equivalent level of safety findings, and the means of compliance issue papers that we seem to levy on project after project. And that's how we're able to compose a list that you have here. And so this is also why we're able to get them approved for rulemaking, because they were higher up in the priority because they met the 2011 presidential mandate. However, regulatory activities that are approved under this mandate are limited in scope, so we're constrained to the type of changes that we could make to these regulations during this rulemaking effort. So public comments that would impose additional requirements or even further relief from current practices in our issue papers may be considered out of scope for this rulemaking effort. The goal is to have the final rule by the fourth quarter of 2019 for this rulemaking activity. There are two more rules that fall under this criteria set forth by the 2011 executive order. The first one is 30-minute all engines operative. And this rule change will allow applicants to follow normal certification procedures as opposed to using issue papers with special conditions if they request to operate at a higher or a different power rating not recognized by our current regulations in order to increase their operational capabilities. The next one is anti-collision lights. Currently, our regulations only permit the use of red anti-collision lights, and now we're expanding that to both red and white. And we hope to have these ready for at least public comment by sometime next year. So this slide is just a plug for two presentations that Martin Crane will be providing this week. The first one is bird strike protection, which will review the ARAC recommendations for Part 27 and Part 29. And then next, we have another presentation on the rotorcraft occupant protection. So this presentation will also review the ARAC recommendations and also discuss FAA reauthorization, the FAA reauthorization that mandated crash-resistant fuel systems on new production rotorcraft. So now I'd like to talk about the modernization of Part 27 and Part 29. So GAMA and ASD has created an industry team to review Part 27 and Part 29. I believe this team started in 2016. And the goal was to determine to see if Part 27 and Part 29 needed to be revamped in a similar fashion to what was done with Part 23. So GAMA and ASD submitted industry recommendations for improving and modernizing Part 27 and Part 29. In this report, it was highlighted that rotorcraft safety has not significantly improved, although there have been amendments to the rotorcraft regulations. Significant changes to address new technology has not been implemented in the last 25 years. So I think this goes along with what David Solar was presenting earlier. So in the U.S., Part 27 accounts for 80 to 90% of the U.S. registered fleet. There's also significant ground to be gained. So there's significant ground to be gained in the modernization of Part 27. So reviewing the most recent 10 years of data from 2009 to 2018, Part 27 rotorcraft accounted for over 90% of the U.S. accidents. Since Part 27 comprises such a high percentage of the fleet and accounts for even a higher percentage of the accidents, it's clear how there's a great opportunity to improve safety in Part 27. So some of the short-term actions that we're taking to address the recommendations in this report, we're going to continue to expand the safety continuum to allow for safety-enhancing equipment into the Part 27 fleet, as well as expanding the safety continuum to areas outside of 1309. Second, going forward, changes to current regulations will attempt to be done with a performance-based approach to allow the influx of new technology. An example of this can hopefully be seen with some of our rulemaking activities, specifically our new battery rule, which was published with the miscellaneous Part 27, Part 29. In this rulemaking, we did not specify the specific type of battery that could be used, but instead provided a more general performance-based set of regulations that would not prohibit new battery technologies to be used. So going forward, some of the things we intend to do is we intend to create a roadmap with collaboration with foreign authorities and industry to lay out how best to implement the recommendations. Now, there's a lot of work that's already been done with Part 23, and depending on who you talk to, there's about 70 to 80% overlap between Part 23 and Part 27. So we intend on leveraging the work that has been done, as well as the lessons learned in the Part 23 rewrite, to develop a path for the modernization of Part 27 and 29. So I'm going to briefly discuss some of the policies that we have in work. I was going to discuss rotorcraft and power lift, but I'm going to probably focus on power lift safety, on the rotorcraft safety continuum here today. So we're currently revising the Part 27 rotorcraft safety continuum in order to further provide some design assurance level requirements for minor and major failure conditions in a lower class of in the lower two classes. So the original policy did not offer any reductions for those failure conditions, and this has presented barriers to getting new technology into the aircraft that need them the most. Also, we're going to be adding a new appendix in order to offer alternate means of compliance to DO 178, so designed to software and hardware. So this means that without issue papers, an applicant can now propose to use either military standards, automotive, or other suitable industry standards in place of DO 178 for the lower classification of hazards. So we hope to get this out for public comment, either really it's with legal, so that could go 2 weeks or 2 years, depending on how long legal reviews that document. But hopefully you should see that sometime early next year. So thank you, and thanks again for the opportunity to share this morning. And if you have any questions, I'll be available. Thanks.